Hello everybody and welcome to JTV. I remember watching a video of a Chabad rabbi introducing Rabbi Sachs to speak at their annual conference. And he said, some things in life are a privilege and some things in life are a pleasure, but it's those unique moments in life that are both a privilege and a pleasure. And I have to say that today for me is one of those moments because I'm joined by Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager is a radio host. I believe he's been a radio host for several decades now. He's a prolific author. We have some of his books here and we're going to talk about some of them. He's a well-known current affairs commentator on political and religious matters. And he's also the father of a massively successful online video channel called PragerU. It does something called edutainment, which is one of my favorite words, and it's kind of what I think is needed now, which is tries to combine education with entertaining content. His books include a book called Why the Jews, which is about trying to make sense of antisemitism. He wrote a book on happiness called Happiness is a Serious Problem. And he's also recently coming out with, and I say that in the present tense because it's still happening, a series of books that are basically a commentary on the Bible. I'm holding up one of them here called The Rational Bible. It is brilliant. It's entirely in English, and its attempt is to try to make the Bible, I believe he's just starting with the 5 books of Moses, more accessible. And I highly recommend you consider purchasing a copy. You can find it on both Amazon in the UK and in America, depending on where you're watching. I don't know if it's available in Israel, and perhaps Dennis can clarify that. But Dennis, first of all, I'm really honoured to have you here on JTV. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be here today.
I'm honoured that you invited me. Thank you.
You think that you're passionate about everyone needing more biblical wisdom in their lives and society needing that, whether they're Jew or non-Jew. Do you believe that everyone needs biblical wisdom in their lives, and why?
Number one, drop the word biblical. Without wisdom, evil takes place. There's a genius story which any Jew watching this knows. There are 4 sons described at the Passover Seder. They are the evil son or bad son, the wise son, the son who doesn't know how to ask, and the simple son. And even as a child, I would say starting in high school, I didn't understand, why was there no good son? If there's a bad son, why isn't there a good son? And here's the reason. The opposite of evil is not simply good. The opposite of evil is wise. You cannot have goodness without wisdom. We live in the age of foolishness. There was a Renaissance, there was an Enlightenment, age of reason. We now live in the age of foolishness. And it's particularly true among the well-educated, who are, in my opinion, the most foolish. So the human being, the human species cannot survive without wisdom. Good intentions without wisdom lead to hell, lead to dystopia. So if you get your wisdom from Aristotle or Plutarch or other classical writers or Shakespeare, I think that's great. However, who's reading them today? At the University of Pennsylvania, the English department removed the painting of Shakespeare because he was a white European male. And so they put a woman of color who was a lesbian in his place, because universities no longer believe in wisdom. They believe in race, gender, and class. So if you get your wisdom from the great Roman and Greek writers and from Shakespeare and et cetera, that's you're way ahead of most. But the greatest wisdom is to be found in the Torah. And that's why when I write these books, I think of a Chinese peasant who never heard of Moses. And can I make sense to that person what the Torah has to say? That's the reader I'm envisioning.
Dennis, were you always into Judaism and Torah? Any teenage rebellions along the way or anything like that?
Well, I did. I never rebelled for the sake of rebellion, but I did not adhere to the halacha as my parents would have wanted, but it wasn't a rebellion because I didn't want them to know it. I didn't want to hurt their feelings. But I'm somewhat of an anomaly. I am an Orthodox Jew with a small O, but not a capital O. And that means that I have Orthodox beliefs, but I don't have full Orthodox practice.
Okay. And I want to talk about some of the ideas that you touch on in your commentary on the Bible, but also throughout your other books. One of the key themes is happiness. That you've written a book about this, as we mentioned at the beginning. But the Torah also talks about serving God with joy. And I feel like it's actually a subject that isn't given enough attention. You say that it's a moral obligation to be happy. Can you explain why you believe this is the case? Does the Bible touch on this? And also, in your book, you sort of say, you seem to be arguing that it really is in our hands, despite whatever situation you're in. And, I've been thinking over the past year and seeing a lot of the challenges that people have been facing, a lot of emotional suffering actually and turmoil from the kind of the isolation that has resulted from COVID. And I sometimes do wonder, are there ever scenarios in which sometimes happiness can be a little bit out of one's control just because of the situation? Are you prepared to, would you concede that at least?
You want me to begin at the end or the beginning?
I've thrown a lot at you, so you can choose.
I'll begin at the end. I live in the same world you live. Suffering is part of the human condition. And in fact, in my book on happiness, I actually have a chapter on a tragic view of life, which I have. And that's part of the reason that I'm happy. And I explain it as follows. Because I understand that the tragic is inevitable. I die, and everyone I love will die, hopefully after me. Although obviously my parents I loved and they died before me. But I mean, the very fact that we all die, even if we had a great life, that's a tragedy. I mean, there's no way around it. Death is very sad. And for some people, this is something that I have spent a lot of time with on my radio show because I talk about everything on my show, not just politics. And I have gotten to speak to probably at least 100 people over the course of my life in person or on the radio who have lost a child. And that's about as horrible a loss as a human can sustain. And of course, many who have lost their spouse. When my father lost my mother, they were married. They were together 72 years, married 69. My father, who was a very happy individual, he was not happy another day in his life for the 6 years he lived after her. So I'm well aware of human suffering and the pain that is involved in life. Obviously, I wouldn't have written a book titled Happiness is a Serious Problem if I didn't recognize that it's a challenge. But the fact that it is a challenge doesn't negate my deep belief that it is a moral obligation to at least act happy. And hopefully then, as a result of acting happy, become happy. Abraham Lincoln, this wouldn't be known to most of your viewers, but Abraham Lincoln, in fact, it wouldn't even be known to most American viewers because they don't learn history in schools any longer. But Abraham Lincoln led a very tragic life. He lost two of his sons whom he adored. His wife was what we would call today probably manic depressive. His country were massacring each other in the hundreds of thousands, and this is the 1860s. That's a lot of people in any time, and certainly then. And he had a very famous line: people are as happy as they decide to be. He decided to be happy despite all of this pain. And that's a decision everybody should make. The reason is, number one, we owe it to everyone in our lives. You owe it to your spouse to have a happy disposition. A miserable spouse, a moody spouse, is as big a challenge to marital harmony as anything I can imagine. And we owe it to our children. Ask a child raised by a depressed parent what it was like, and you will never ask, why do I argue that people need to act happy or try to be happy? The damage done to children by a depressed parent, the damage done to a parent by a depressed child, and as I said, to marriages. Ask people, ask the depressed, who would you rather spend a month on an island with? A person as moody as you, or a happy person? See, the moody can't stand being with the moody. In fact, it's my theory that the moody never marry the moody. Every marriage is either two non-moodies or a moody and a non-moody. But I've never in my life, and I've been around, met two moodies marry each other. The moody never marry one of their own. They're not stupid. They always marry someone who is happier than they are. Everyone wants to be around happy people. I don't mean giddy, superficial, constantly laughing, but having a happy, upbeat disposition. Now, I got this from Judaism. Judaism is a behavioral religion. Act X, you'll feel X. It is an astonishing thing how much the Torah commands v'samachta, and you shall be happy. Or ashrei ha'ish, that's not in the Torah, it's in the Tanakh, it's in the later Bible. But it's filled with commands to be happy, to rejoice. And how about this, the ultimate, which is not in the Torah, it's rabbinic, but is quite old and remarkable, as I'm sure many of your viewers know, and I know you know. If even when you're sitting Shiva, you cannot sit Shiva on Shabbat. That's an astonishing thing, that it's almost chutzpah, that the religion will tell you, I'm sorry, but you can't mourn the loss of your loved one on Shabbat. Go back to it on Saturday night. Judaism is deeply behavioral, and it is very, very deeply committed to happy. Another religious argument. The best argument for atheism is unhappy religious people. A miserable religious person is the greatest argument for atheism, and a happy religious person is the greatest argument for religiosity. I am very involved with Chabad, and I speak for them around the world, and I have often noted that a big part of their success is because Chabad rabbis are known for being happy, and they have as many problems in life as everybody else, but they have a cheerful disposition. And this was not true in much of Orthodox life outside of Chabad. When one thinks of the East European shtetl Jew, one doesn't think of a happy-go-lucky character. It's just the way it is. It's not a critique, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was a big part of Chassidut, was Yivdu et Hashem b'simcha, to worship God and enjoy. Whereas that was not the case in much of Misnagdish or non-Hasidic Judaism. So I'll end with one final thing. I have broadcast since 1999 an hour of my show each week. I have a 3-hour daily show across the United States. The second hour every Friday is called the Happiness Hour. And in the introduction to it each week, I note, the happy make the world better, the unhappy make it worse. And people don't know how true that is. Happy people do not tear down societies. Happy people don't become communists or Nazis. And in fact, in the contemporary situation, I've never met a happy leftist. I've met happy liberals, I've met happy conservatives, I've met unhappy conservatives and unhappy liberals, but I've never met a happy leftist. As soon as you get happy, you leave the left. You can become a liberal. I don't say you become a conservative, but the people tearing down the cities in America last year were not happy people. And what our universities are doing, and I think this is somewhat true in the UK as well, is teaching people about how miserable their lives are because their societies are miserable. And it's almost a mitzvah to be unhappy. So I'm a big advocate of happiness.
Just two follow-up points to that. Number one, in terms of what you just said at the end, is there not a place, I'm not necessarily saying in the case of what the universities are teaching, but is there not ever a place for righteous indignation? And the second point I'd ask, and forgive me if this is too personal, but would you say in the case of your father, who you said was never happy after he lost your mother, are you saying according to this he should have tried a bit harder?
So no, you can ask me anything. I think personal questions are often helpful because they make me more real. So I have no problem with that. Let me begin with the righteous indignation. I have daily righteous indignation. My anger at the left for destroying the United States and Western civilization is very deep, but I have a happy disposition. I do what I can to fight them, and then I celebrate life. In fact, as I tell my friends, if you get down, you've given them a major victory. I don't want to hand them a victory, so I don't hand them my happiness. So righteous indignation is not the opposite of happiness. Unhappiness is the opposite of happiness. And as regards my father wrote his autobiography. He published it himself. It's a wonderful book, actually. And he called it Attitude and Gratitude. That was his theme in life. So I do want to note that while I knew the sadness that pervaded his life after my mother's death, he did not walk around moping. In other words, if you visited him, he had a cheerful disposition, and he was constantly grateful for the years he had with my mother and constantly grateful for the wonderful life that he had led until then. But I was being honest with regard to your question. Do I not recognize that things can happen that are just so awful that they cause people to be less happy? And so I gave him as an example. But if you had visited my father during those 6 years, you would not have left and said, I was just with a depressed man.
Okay, I want to move to some Jewish issues in a moment, but just one more sort of topic of general wisdom and perhaps how that might apply to your Bible commentary. I've seen some of your content where you talk about friendship. This is a very important topic to me, as someone, with a few friends, and also as someone that's single at the moment and, beginning my adult life. And you said that a friend is someone who you can tell everything to, and the more you hide, the less close you are. First of all, I just want to thank you so much for this teaching, because this is so enlightening. It's actually changed, over the past few years, my concept of what friendship really means, and it might have meant that in some ways I may have lost a friend or two in terms of my own perspective. But it's true. It's absolutely true. I feel like I would also add that it's aside from being able to share everything with them, it's also that they are sort of supportive and can help you become better as a result once you've shared that with them. And I just want to know whether you'd agree with that. I suspect you would. And are there any sources in the Bible that come to mind when you think of friendship?
I'm delighted that you picked up on that, because everything I do is in the hope that I will touch somebody's life. So you wanted me to be personal. That's as personal. It's quite personal. I know that I have a lot of answers. I don't have all the answers. I don't know why God made the mosquito, as an example. There are many riddles. I don't even know why God made man, for that matter. That's somewhat of a mystery as well. But I do have a lot of answers within the human condition, and I want to share them while I am well and able to touch a lot of lives, which, thank God, I've been able because of the public nature of my work. So I'm glad you picked up on that. I knew this when I was in high school. I always had a male friend or two whom I loved. I mean, I would have no problem. I never had a problem hugging men, saying I loved them. And the men in my life have been of immeasurable, literally immeasurable importance to me. So yes, that's the definition, or one of the definitions, someone to whom you can say everything. That is the ideal in a marriage as well. I mean, marriage is basically your best friend plus the sexual element. I didn't have a sexual element with my male friends, but that's one of the reasons you have this unique bond, the friendship plus the sexual tension, the sexual act with the person you marry. So that's a particularly close relationship, but it tends to be easier to be able to make such friendships outside of marriage with the same sex. In fact, I have on the internet something I wrote about 10 years ago. I think it's something like 8 questions or whatever number of questions you should answer before you get married. And a lot of people broke up their relationship with someone they thought they would marry after they read my questions. And that was great news to me, because it's better to get divorced before marriage than after marriage. So one of them is the person you are thinking of marrying, does he have any close male friends, and does she have any close female friends? It's a very good sign if they do. I don't say it's a disqualifying sign if they don't, but I think it's a yellow flag. It's not a red flag, but it is a yellow flag. So yes, I'm glad you picked up on that. As regards the Bible and friendship, obviously David and Jonathan is the most obvious example of an incredibly close bond. And it's interesting, the Torah or the Tanakh does not spend that much time on that issue. And I don't have an explanation as to why, but let's put it this way. If you share a love of the Torah with somebody, that is a good basis for a friendship.
Absolutely. That's another thing, isn't it? Values, having common values. And I think that is just an essential ingredient of friends. You mentioned that sorry, I just want to clarify. You were saying that it's important that when you're looking for a spouse, that they have close friends. Can you elaborate on why? And I actually I've just recalled in my head, there was once a girl I was dating, and she was quite sort of adamant that, friends sort of, are a bit distant, especially at the beginning stages of a marriage. And for me, I mean, obviously the spouse has to be your priority and come first. To me, this was a bit of a alarm bell.
Tell me again, because sometimes the transmission isn't complete. She said to you, what about having girlfriends?
Well, no, just having just friends in general should sort of be, you need to distance yourself a bit from them, especially in the early stages of marriage.
I don't understand why.
I completely agree with you. I actually said to her, or maybe I just said it internally, I can't even remember, it was so long ago. I said, you're actually asking me to do something I could not do. Because these are people that mean so much to me. You're asking me to do something that's literally not possible.
Many years ago, my 3rd year at the uni, as you call it, I was at the University of Leeds. Don't ask me why, but I was. And it was a great year, as it turned out. But I did note in an article I wrote upon return that I had made friends with I make friends very easily. It's a blessing in my life, and I made friends with fellow students from, I remember, Canada, India, Germany, and I'm sure a couple of other, Australia, but I didn't make any English friends that year. And I think that this notion of intimacy with anybody, perhaps except the spouse, seemed to have been more foreign to the British students than to others. But I guessed wrong in your case, but I still do recall that belief.
Yeah. And I also think about, I see some people, thank God it hasn't happened with my friends, but I see some people, once they get married, they seem to almost drop everything, not just friends, but everything in their life. And not only do I find it sad and disturbing and and wrong, but I also think it's not smart, because what happens if a spouse can't provide every need that you have? What happens if something goes wrong? I don't know. I guess, I don't know. Everyone has their own reasons for doing what they do, but I just find it just a bad approach to life.
It was my joy. Great. Continues to be a joy of my life. The closeness that my wife feels to my male friends, and and I adore her female friends. In fact, it was her female friend who was responsible for our meeting, and I can't thank her enough. So I don't quite understand that. Love. We have a saying in America, and you might have it as well, but love is not a pie. You take a slice out of a pie, and there's one slice less of the pie. But love doesn't work that way. It's like anyone who has a child is convinced they cannot love the next child as much. And lo and behold, that's not what happens. That's one of the nice things about love, is it doesn't diminish the more people that you include in the circle. So you can't spend as much time if you're used to going out with your male friends to a casino or to football games or what have you, or the cinema, and you now get married. I think that by and large you should try to spend as much time with your spouse as possible. But I am not one bit less close to my male friends being married. So I agree with you.
Good. I suspect there's going to be a lot of agreeing on things in this interview. I want to move to some religious and Jewish matters. This is sort of just a more broadly religious thing. You speak a lot about your love for America. I also have a love of America as an idea and what it was about. But I feel like a lot of people just aren't so familiar with what America was intended to be. I personally believe America is one of the Torah's greatest creations. Can you explain sort of why that is the case? And also, I don't know if you've asked this before, but what do you think would be some of Judaism's biggest critiques of America and modern America today? Because we often talk about what it brought, but
the last sentence, some of Judaism's what about America?
Judaism's biggest critiques about modern America.
Well, first of all, I do love America, and I'm watching it destroyed. And I say this with incredible sadness, because since World War II, each generation has learned nothing about how to appreciate liberty. Liberty is a value, not an instinct. And the utopian streak of the left, there was this racism and this slavery. And of course, because there's no wisdom on the left, they don't understand that slavery was universal. There is no country, nation, ethnic group, or tribe that did not have slavery. So a person who has even a modicum of wisdom does not ask who had slavery. They ask who abolished slavery. The norm is slavery. The exception is the abolition of slavery. And actually beginning with your country, with British Christians, the abolitionist movement arose and, of course, it spread to the U.S. and caused the greatest loss of life in the war that ended slavery in the United States. But everybody had slaves. I mean, it was as normal as eating to have a slave in human history. But then arose these countries in the West that abolished it, and in large measure because of the Bible. That's the British abolitionist movement used the Bible as its text for why it should be abolished. I make that very clear in my Rational Bible commentary on Exodus. I mean, there's a law that you cannot return a slave to its master. I mean, that's 3,000 years before anybody even thought in such a way. You can't return a slave. Do not steal means you cannot kidnap people and in order to sell them as slaves. That's the first definition of the commandment, "Thou shalt not steal." Is in Hebrew, "Genevat nefashot." You can't steal people. Then it also includes, of course, property. You can't steal property, but it's first and foremost you can't steal people. That would have alone meant that there was no transatlantic slave trade. So America was founded by Christians who were in love with the Torah. The most iconic symbol of the American Revolution is called the Liberty Bell. There's only one thing written on the Liberty Bell, and it is a verse from Leviticus, the third book of the Torah. A lot of the founders knew Hebrew. Not only did they know the Torah, they knew Hebrew. And anyway, who knows Leviticus today? Who even knows what Leviticus is? And they quoted it, and that's the only thing written on the Liberty Bell. And you shall proclaim liberty throughout
throughout the land to all its inhabitants.
Yes, to all its inhabitants. So the founders all acknowledged that this was their basis, specifically the Torah, more than the rest of the Old Testament, which they loved, and the New Testament, which they loved, but it was the Torah. In fact, the founders said that America was the second Israel. They didn't deny the Jews were the first Israel, the first chosen people. They thought of America as a second chosen people. And I have believed that as an American Jew, that I am a member of two chosen peoples. But I'm watching the experiment be destroyed by the elites in the United States. The best educated are the worst. And I'm very sad to say that Jews are disproportionately involved in the tearing down of the United States. When Jews leave Judaism, it's very often unhealthy results that take place. Not always, but very often. So what would the Torah's critique of the U.S. be? I think that the Torah would have said about America, with the exception, obviously, of racism, which, and by the way, America became the least racist multiracial country on earth. But let's say till 1970s America, it would have said, we're all created in God's image and God has no color. So how could you possibly have a racist attitude? That would have been its biggest critique. Otherwise, I do believe that America is very much a Torah-based society, and now the emphasis that on race, that color is of any significance, is the most anti-Torah idea I can think of. You went to yeshiva, I went to yeshiva, so Lama nivra adam yechidi. Why was the first human being created as one person, so that nobody should ever say my forefather was more important than yours? The Torah is utterly unethnically interested, utterly. God has no color. Adam and Eve have no color. And the Jews had no color. The Jews left with an Erev Rav. The Jews were not even ethnically pure. The Jews left with a bunch of non-Jews whom were told over and over to love the stranger who lives in our midst. The very fact that that you could convert to being an Israelite was almost unique. You couldn't convert to being something in the ancient world. If you wanted to be, you could convert to a religion. Anyway, that was true, but you couldn't convert to a nation. But when you join the Jews, you join the nation, not just the religion. So we don't know, we don't give a damn about ethnicity. So America today is living a total repudiation of Torah ethics.
Wow, and I personally believe that when it comes to values, and changing a nation's values, it doesn't happen from the top down and from less big political changes. It happens from bottom up, and the thing that you're doing. I've heard you say that you're far more interested in influence than power. I feel exactly the same way in terms of my own life and what I want to do. But I actually think that in some way, influence has more power than power does.
Yes, that's fair to say, but I agree with you. But the original point is my point and yours. I'm not disagreeing with you in the least. That I have zero desire. I mean, truly zero. I rather study entomology than have power over any other human being. But the desire to have power over other human beings is apparently one of the ubiquitous ugly traits in human nature. Human nature has a lot of ugly traits. That's just the way it is. You can become a beautiful human being, but you have to work against your nature to do so. Apparently, the desire to have power over other people it's not universal, but it is ubiquitous. And that is exactly, again, what the left wants. It wants to control as many people's lives as possible. So this is a very ugly part of human nature.
Now, Dennis, you wrote a book about anti-Semitism called Why the Jews, where you try to explain the root cause of anti-Semitism. I've always held that you cannot explain anti-Semitism, its irrationality, its intensity, its contradictory reasons for hating the Jews without recognizing that there's a deeper spiritual phenomenon, spiritual battle that's going on. And I actually think that trying to explain anti-Semitism without this can lead you and lead historians to go completely insane. Can you explain a bit about this from your perspective and what the book tries to argue about the deeper spiritual components going on when it comes to anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is hatred of Sinai. This is
Absolutely.
not new to me. The rabbis said this thousands of years ago. So here is my chiddush, as it were, a point that I came up with many years ago. The rabbis of the Talmud spend more time discussing whether you can eat an egg born on a Jewish holy day than they do on why Jews are hated. I always point this out to non-Jews and to Jews. And the reason is it wasn't a puzzle to them why the Jews are hated. They knew the reason and they were right. And they have a play on words, which your viewers will find of interest if they don't already know this. The Hebrew word for hatred is sin'ah, and the Hebrew word for Sinai, Mount Sinai, is Sinai. They have a different consonant in the beginning, but it's irrelevant. They sound the same, Sinah, Sinai. And that play on words is the rabbi's way of explaining the great sin'ah, the great hatred, comes from Sinai, from Sinai. And they're right. The Jews introduced to the world a God who makes moral demands and judges everyone, not just Jews, everyone. This was a brand new idea in human history. People don't like to be morally judged. They hate it. So the Jews have never been forgiven for their invention of a universal God who judges everybody by the same moral yardstick. And that has been the root of Jew hatred, because Jew hatred is unique, and I could prove this. Every ethnic group is disliked by another ethnic group. That's universal. The Poles don't like the Germans, the Russians don't like the Poles, the Irish don't like the English. I mean, it's universal. But only Jew bigotry or Jew hatred is exterminationist. Anti-Semitism is the belief that the Jews should be annihilated. It's not the belief I don't like Jews. I don't care if you don't like Jews. I care if you want to kill Jews. If you don't like Jews, it means nothing to me. I am not aching to be liked. It means nothing to me. As a Jew or as a human or anything, I do not live to be liked. But I don't want to be exterminated. I don't want to be murdered. So that's where Jew hatred is unique. The desire to exterminate the Jew, and that has been throughout Jewish history. What is it? Israel is no more. Isn't that what the Romans said? I mean, that was the belief. So that is a unique aspect of Jew hatred. The God part is the Sinai part, and here is, I said I had my chidush, my new idea, but it's not new anymore. If Sinai is the root of Jew hatred, of anti-Semitism, Sinai is the solution as well to anti-Semitism. If we brought the world to Sinai, we Jews, that would end anti-Semitism. A world that embraced the 10 Commandments would not wish to exterminate the Jew. Jews, however, don't bring the world. Jews don't live their mission. Orthodox Jews don't, and non-Orthodox Jews don't. This is the great lament of my life. If you ask a Christian, do you have a mission to the world? You could ask a 12-year-old. He'd say, of course, bring the world to Christ. Bring the good news of Christ's coming to the world. Ask a Muslim, you have a mission to the world? A 10-year-old will tell you, of course. Bring everybody to Allah and to the Quran. Ask a Jew, what is your mission to the world? See, if you ask an Orthodox Jew, they won't even have a mission to the world in most cases. The Chabad is the one exception. They spread the 7 laws of the children of Noah. But if you ask Orthodox Jews, no, our concern is to make sure that Jews live halachically, that they do the mitzvot, the mitzvahs. That's what an Orthodox Jew would answer. So there's no mission to the world. In all my years at yeshiva, I never heard once that we have a mission to the world. And as for other Jews, secular Jews do think they have a mission to the world, social justice. That's why Jews disproportionately embraced communism and all the other isms that substitute for Judaism. So ironically, the only Jews who have a mission to the world are the Jews who basically don't give a damn about Judaism, or think they do, but they have confused it with all sorts of leftist isms. Our task is to bring the world to Sinai. That's it. The world should be blessed through us, as God said to Abraham. That's the reason God chose us, so that all the world's nations shall be blessed through us. And if the world lived by the 10 Commandments alone, we would be living in a heavenly sphere. But as I said, how many Jews think it's their task to bring the world to or bring the 10 Commandments to the world? Not many.
I must tell you, I would certainly make an exception for the yeshiva I went to, which was Aisha Torah. It was founded by an incredible man. I don't know if you ever met him, Rabbi Noah Weinberg.
I did. In fact, he was incredible.
Wow, because I certainly did feel there, and you're probably right that it was an exception to the rule. I did feel there that there was a very keen sense of global mission, and frankly that global mission, which was Abraham's mission, what inspires me every day in my Jewish life. And it's, you're right, you need a mission, and we need to push that more.
Well, that's why I'm taking the time to be with you. You give me hope.
Well, I don't know what to take with that compliment. Rabbi Sachs, who I want to speak about next, he said, "Compliments are fine, just don't inhale." I wanted to ask you a bit about your relationship with Rabbi Sachs, because I know that you did had a few conversations with him publicly.
Did you see the video of the two of us in Canada?
I absolutely did. Yeah, and I just wondered
we were the two speakers at a Pesach retreat for Chabad in British Columbia. I thank God now that he's passed, especially. I thank God that was videoed.
Well, I just wondered if I mean, I would have loved to have been there. Just wondered if you had, given his really sort of tragic and early passing, if you had any particularly reflections on Rabbi Sachs, maybe any personal encounters, any stories to share, any particular things that you've learned from him?
Well, he embodied what I'm talking about. He was a Kiddush Hashem. That's the greatest mitzvah. That he sanctified God before the world. When non-Jews heard him, saw him, spoke to him, the immediate response was not just what an impressive man, but it must be an impressive religion. And that's the greatest compliment you can pay him.
Absolutely. I want to talk briefly about Israel and anti-Zionism. You speak a lot about that. Rabbi Sachs also spoke a fair bit about that. You believe, as do I, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. But you can find some people in politics, I certainly find this in the UK, where you'll have politicians who, they certainly don't talk the anti-Zionist talk of wanting to eradicate Israel. There's no talk of, that level of vilification or demonization or delegitimization. But I always seem to find that they always seem to be the first to criticize Israel whenever Israel engages in a defensive war. And they're kind of one of the last to actually stand up for Israel when it actually comes to the moment when, the chips are down. Are those people anti-Semitic?
Well, look, let's be clear. When I spoke at the Oxford Union, your moral compass is broken if you don't see the moral superiority of Israel to its neighbors. Doesn't mean inherent superiority. I mean, I just have to make that clear for those who got a graduate degree. So Israel is a free country. Israel has a free press. Israel has enormous self-criticism. Israel has a free and independent judiciary. Israel enables its Arab citizens, even those who don't believe Israel has a right to exist, to vote, to pray, to travel. Probably the freest Arabs in the Middle East are the Arabs of Israel. Gays have one of the biggest parades on earth for Gay Pride Parade in Tel Aviv each year. If there's no such thing as a gay parade in Egypt or in Jordan, let alone Saudi Arabia, and you're going to tell me that there is somehow this either moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas, or Israel and Fatah, or Israel and the Palestinians, or Israel and any of the others, or Iran? I mean, there's something wrong with you. You don't think clearly. Your moral compass is broken. So this doesn't make you an anti-Semite. It makes you a fool. And as I said earlier, foolishness, which is the opposite of wisdom, is the mother of evil.
Absolutely. I feel the same as you, and it's I'm often baffled when I see people who say one thing when let's say the tide has calm with regard to Israel, but when the chips are down and Israel needs friends, they seem to desert.
Well, I know. Well, look, I mean, it is astonishing when you have these folks on the left in America, Britain, Israel's disproportionate response to Hamas sending all these rockets to murder as many Israelis as possible. What does that even mean? What is Israel to do? If Israel sent as many rockets over to Palestinian territories as was sent to Israel, over Gaza, as Gaza sends to Israel, would that be proportionate? Presumably, but it would certainly kill a lot of Gazans. People come to your house and they're armed and they try to kill the members of your family, and you throw a grenade at them. Are you supposed to be attacked for disproportionate response? What does a proportionate response mean? As many bullets as they shoot? They're the aggressors. That's the issue.
Absolutely. Dennis, one of the last topics I wanted to discuss with you was actually your view about Jewish-Christian relations. A lot of Jewish people, I mean, I don't know what it's like so much in America, but certainly I find in Europe, are very concerned about having too close Jewish-Christian relations. Also, and I don't mean sort of one-to-one, but in terms of institutional, there's a lot of awareness of the history of certainly the way Christianity and Christian anti-Semitism has been to Jewish people in Europe. There's a lot of cynicism when it comes to accepting Christian support of Israel. You make a distinction between European and American Christianity as being sort of different experiences. The first thing I want to ask, can you explain what you mean by that? The second question I want to ask, I'm going to throw them all in if that's okay. The second question I was going to ask is, what do you say to those who are skeptical of, let's say, evangelical support for Israel because they say, well, it's only a cynical ploy to get all the Jews there? And the third thing I'd want to say is, do you think for European Jews, how do you think we should feel about Jewish-Christian relations?
So I'll begin with the last one first. I always tell American Jews who speak about the Christian anti-Semitism that they're talking about European Christian anti-Semitism. The Jews of America are the luckiest Jews who ever lived outside of Israel. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. The United States, of course there was anti-Semitism in the U.S. The U.S. is composed of flawed human beings. My father wrote his senior class thesis at the City College of New York on anti-Semitism in America, places that wouldn't sell Jews homes, law firms that wouldn't allow Jewish lawyers in, Harvard with its numerous clauses, its quota on not admitting Jews. And yet my father raised my brother and me to believe that we were the luckiest Jews in history to be American Jews, and he was right. That's why it's a Jew who wrote God Bless America, one of the most famous songs in the United States. It was compared to anywhere else, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, America was the golden of Medina. It was the golden country. And he said it at a time when, there was more anti-Semitism in America. So yes, there is a major difference between Europe's Christians and America's Christians. So that gives America's Christians even less basis upon which to be suspicious of Christian support for Jews in Israel. They're bigots. Many of my fellow Jews are bigots. And I'm sad to say it, but it's just a fact. The biggest supporters in Europe as well, generally speaking, the biggest supporters of Israel and the Jews are Christians, including often in Europe. Why we would reject them because their ancestors committed pogroms is like a black rejecting white support today because the ancestors of some whites were slave owners. It's completely irrational it's self-destructive and it's immoral. I don't even understand it. I'm going to judge you by what your ancestors did.
Well, it might not be judging per se, but it might be I'm nervous of, let's say, of us having too close relationship or taking your support or.
Well, I don't know what there is to be nervous about. If they end up being hostile to us, then I don't know. I don't even know. I truly don't understand it. I with Christians more than Jews as a general rule in my life, and I truly don't understand. What is there to be nervous about? Why aren't Jews nervous about the left? The left hates Israel. The left supports the enemies of Israel's existence. The left is teaching young kids on American college campuses to loathe Israel. And then they're not nervous about. They're nervous about the Christians who have nights to honor Israel, singing Hava Nagila in Hebrew, as I have spoken at many of these events at churches and have seen and have been moved to tears. Look.
Yeah, but then they say, Dennis.
I have such disdain for people who are ingrates. The ugliest of the human traits is ingratitude. The ingratitude of Jewry to Christians today, and especially in America, is just loathsome and self-destructive. I made a deal with the leading Christian of the time outside of Billy Graham, Jerry Falwell. When I was in my late 20s, I was almost your age, basically. And I was the head of a big Jewish institution in California. So we brought people out for interviews. So one of them was Jerry Falwell, who was, as I said, the best known American Christian after Billy Graham. And he's a fundamentalist Christian, and he was very supportive of Israel. And it's actually on video. I'd like to get a hold of this video. I would love to put it on YouTube. And at one point I said to him, Reverend Falwell, can we shake on this deal? You and your supporters will support Israel and the Jewish people until Jesus comes, and we in turn promise to recognize him when he does. And he shook on it, and I shook on it, and I don't understand what Jews are worried about. First of all, they don't support us in order to bring Jesus. There's nothing in Christian theology that believes a Christian can hasten the coming of Jesus, okay? So this is all made up by Christian haters among Jews. It's a lie. It is 100% lie that's why they support us. I'll tell you why they support us. They support us because it says in Genesis that I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. They think God will bless them for blessing the Jews. Not a bad reason, by the way, in my opinion, and I agree with them. I think God does bless those who bless the Jews and curse those who curse the Jews. So I happen to agree with them since I happen to take the Torah seriously, unlike most Jews.
Well, I'm totally on the same page as you, and you express that better than I ever have. In fact, just before my final question, one thing that I want to just quickly pick you up on is a criticism that I've heard of Jewish political commentators who are on the right, who are conservatives. One of the criticisms that people might make about, let's say religious or conservative commentators make about their fellow commentators on the left is that they sometimes conflate their politics and religion, and sometimes project their political values onto religion. Actually, a friend of mine, Jonathan Neumann, who wrote a book about this, I believe I actually saw you on the blurb, as writing an affirmation about the book, and he was talking about that from the perspective of the left. Is there ever a danger that such a thing can occur on the right, and for conservative political commentators like yourself, where the two are conflated, or perhaps let's say the conventional wisdom of conservatives gets conflated with a religious position? So an example I'm thinking of is abortion. So if I haven't looked at it into too much detail, but I do find there are, in your case, but I do find there are Jewish politically conservative spokespeople who will just take the classic American conservative position on abortion, that it is a form of murder. But the Jewish, and they are often observant Jews, but the Jewish Orthodox or observant position is that it's a bit more nuanced than that, and it's certainly it's certainly not seen as a positive thing, but there's a bit more leniency, and it's not, as far as I understand it, it's not seen as murder certainly in the first trimester. I don't know about the later stages. I haven't looked at it in too much detail, but just wondered if you ever feel that is a concern.
Well, every Orthodox Jew I've spoken to, and all the halacha that I have read, including Rambam. Ironically, Rambam is a bit more lenient with abortion vis-a-vis Jews than with non-Jews. He uses the word murder. When non-Jews have abortions, he believes it's murder. That's the term he uses. I don't walk around calling it murder, as it happens. My position is that it's got to be worth more than a worm. That's as radical as I get, that somehow the human fetus is not a worm. And for the pro-choice people, it is. It literally has no worth, none. It's an astonishing position to hold. It's certainly not based on science. So I wouldn't ban it, by the way. I would ban third trimester, except if the woman's health is at stake, which almost is never the case. So I don't know how to answer that further than that. I do think it is wrong when I hear people refer to it as a Holocaust. As I have often noted, Jews would have been very, very hurt if if between 1939 and 1945 every pregnant Jewish woman had a forced abortion. But they would have taken that infinitely over the Holocaust. So I never call it a Holocaust. I don't like that language. I don't even say the word murder, but it is homicide. I mean, it's got to be something. The notion a woman can do what she wants with her own body it's true. A woman should be allowed to do what she wants with her own body, but it's not her body. It's in her body. Nobody asks a pregnant woman, "How's your body?" They go, "How's your baby?" So it's just another one of the enormous lies that come from that part of the spectrum that are part of our language. As regards Judaism conflated with conservatism, I am conservative because I take the Torah seriously. That's I do conflate them. There's no question about it. How could I not conflate them? I wouldn't be a serious Jew or a serious thinker. Well, what am I going to say? My Judaism has nothing to do with how I look at life, that I judge people not by the color of their skin. That comes from Judaism, as I said earlier. Everything the left stands for, I believe, is immoral. And I can't think of I'm not talking liberals. Care for the poor? They don't care for the poor. The left cares for the poor as much as the communists cared for the worker. They use the poor. They use the black. They use every group they speak in favor of. So of course I conflate the two. Otherwise, I would be intellectually dishonest. However, having said that, I founded a synagogue in Los Angeles a few years ago with some friends, and we're very traditional. We believe the Torah is from God, but we do use electricity on Shabbat, so we have a Zoom minyan for the last year, and I have been teaching it for 25 years every Shabbat when I'm in California. and of course now I've been on Zoom every Shabbat. I teach every week, and I have not once talked politics. If you were a person on the left and you zoomed in to my Torah minyan, we call it the Torah minyan, you wouldn't have any idea what our politics was. Whereas I get my conservatism from the Torah, I do not use my teaching at the minyan to advance my conservatism. I teach the Torah, and you will draw whatever conclusion you want from it. We actually forbid questions with regard to the political situation. That's how strict we are, not to do what the left does with in their synagogues.
Right, and I think that's an important principle. Dennis, you've been so incredibly generous with your time, and it's been such an honor to speak with you. I just want to, my very final question, I just had to ask, because I see you as someone that's very, very secure and firm in your beliefs. Have you ever changed your opinion on anything?
On a lot of things, actually, but here's the irony. I started out as a liberal and as a Democrat, and both left me. I didn't leave either of them. I was taught as a liberal that you judge people by their character, not their color. I was taught that you do not have separate dormitories for blacks and whites. Now the liberals go along with the left that you should have a black dormitory on a college campus, or that you judge people by their color. So I am the same liberal, ironically. It looks like I've changed, but it changed. The only thing that made me leave liberals and join the Republican Party was I came to realize I agreed with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan said one thing, and that's when I changed my party affiliation. Government is not the solution, it's the problem. That's the American view of government. It should be extremely limited. And as I have put it 100 times, the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. But on specific issues, well, I'll give you one your viewers can look at. For 20 years, I've been writing a column every week, so there are 1,000 of my columns on the internet. A few weeks ago, I wrote a column called The Good German. And this was a big change in my life just recently. I grew up having contempt for the good German, quote unquote. Who was the good German? The German who in no way participated in any actions against Jews, but said nothing. And I now realize that it was nothing specific to Germans. And my next column was The Good American. Human beings don't speak up. In the United States, if you speak up as a conservative, you will be put down. You will be ostracized on Facebook. You might even be fired from your job, but you won't be sent to the Gulag and you won't be sent to Auschwitz. The Gestapo won't come to your door and the KGB won't come to your door. So I no longer have the contempt for the quiet German or quiet Russian under Stalin that I used to have. Now that I have seen the quiet American and the quiet Brit, the quiet Australian and the quiet Canadian, people who are easily intimidated, and that's the human condition. So this was a huge change in my inner life. That took place recently. I used to be for the minimum wage. I now have come to realize it destroys jobs. And that's far lower in its import in some ways than what I just told you before about the good German and good American. But I'm completely open to changing my mind. I don't want to spend another minute with a bad idea. That's my theory. Why would I want to be wrong? So I am completely committed to changing my mind, because if I'm wrong, I wasted so much time and I've lost credibility. But I don't have an agenda other than what is true and what is good. And that has led me to a lot of, I think, sober and good decisions.
Well, Dennis, it's been a real honor. Thank you so much for joining us on JTV today. Thank you for what I've learned from you over the span of many years now. And I'm just so grateful for your time. And I wish you many more years of influencing other people. So thank you.
Thank you. You will know when you get older how much that means to somebody who hopes that his ideas will live on. So God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Appreciate it.